Mikhail Nechemyevich Tal, aka the Magician from Riga, was a Latvian Soviet chess genius who many would regard as the greatest attacking player of all time. In the 628-page mammoth book of the world's greatest chess games, Tal is featured more than literally anyone else. He was the 8th world champion and an esteemed chess writer, credited with some of the most poetic statements ever written about the game. In today's video, we're going to start off with one of these statements and from it build a process for finding, exploring, understanding and learning all the opening theory that you need to become a chess expert. Let's begin. You must take your opponent into a deep, dark forest where 2 + 2 = 5 and the path leading out is only wide enough for one. This is where we're starting, by understanding all the possible games of chess as potential paths through an incredibly large forest. By the best estimates, there are something like 10 to the 120 possible games of chess. Just for a bit of perspective, it's estimated that there are something like 10 to the 80 atoms in the known universe, i.e. 100 duodecillion times less atoms than possible games of chess. This is a fairly large forest. When you sit down to play a game of chess, you and your opponent prepare to take a walk through the forest from Tal's metaphor, each with the intention of being the one who makes it out the other side. In this sense, opening preparation is a map that you're allowed to bring with you. The problem is, your opponent gets a map as well. Also, each map will show you such a minuscule fraction of the total number of paths through the forest that you won't even have 1 duotrigentillionth of the information necessary to have seen so much as 1 quadrillionth of the total expanse of the forest. That makes our map sound fairly useless. Fear not, however, your opponent has the same problem. On your walk through the forest, you and your opponent take it in turns to choose the path that you will both take, at each junction choosing one from something like 30 different paths to continue your journey down. This happens again and again and again until you're both left standing in front of a singular path leading to the capture of one of your kings, at which point the loser gets mauled by a bear or something, I don't know. There is another crucial aspect to this unnecessarily extended metaphor that makes this seemingly ruthless journey a little less daunting. You can walk through the forest as many times as you'd like. You don't even need someone to walk with. You can spend thousands of hours roaming the forest on your own, familiarizing yourself with the different biomes and structures around you to the point where you know vast areas like the back of your hand, even if they aren't paths on your map. The job of your map then isn't to plot your exact route to victory, but to be optimized for leading you into mostly familiar and previously explored areas that you are better equipped to navigate than your opponent. And this is the key realization that will allow you to cultivate a healthy approach to learning opening theory. You are not trying to conquer the forest. You will never conquer the forest. The best supercomputers in the world have not conquered the forest. You just need to be better at navigating it than your opponent. A lot of beginners, when they start to prepare for the opening in chess, try to learn as many moves of objective, engine-perfect, mainline theory as possible, just to see 9 book moves in their chess.com analysis report so they can feel like a grandmaster. I did this exact same thing when I was climbing from 800 to around 1200, rattling off the same 7 moves of Roy Lopez theory just to try and play as accurately as possible, thinking that this was the goal of opening prep. It is not. Doing this, you are walking down the equivalent of a road in the forest, a path walked down by millions before you and to be walked down by millions after you. A massive 10-meter wide strip of pristinely painted concrete that will lead to familiar territory for not only you, but undoubtedly your opponent as well. The purpose of opening prep is instead to be the first to take your opponent down a path that they've ideally never, but at least seldom walked down. A quick side note, obviously this is much harder to get away with the better your opponents are. If you're a world-leading grandmaster, for instance, I'd assume Magnus Carlsen isn't watching this video. If he is, I love you, but I thought I'd clarify that this video's target audience is rated under 2700. Cheers. So, after this completely unnecessary and long-winded metaphor, we've established that our aim when building an opening repertoire is to find the dangerous-looking, less walked-down paths, and our aim when learning an opening repertoire is to familiarize ourselves with the surroundings rather than stare at the floor, i.e. understand the structure and general ideas of positions in your opening, rather than mindlessly memorizing move after move. So, now that we've established what we should be looking for in crafting the ideal opening repertoire, the question is, how do you actually achieve this? It's all well and good knowing what to do, but now I'm going to teach you how to do it. Okay, so as I mentioned before, there are generally speaking these 4 broad concepts, broad categories that we can break down your approach to the opening repertoire into. We've got finding, exploring, understanding, and then learning. So it would be lovely if this worked in a very nice flowchart, for instance, where you find your opening, tick, then you go and explore that opening, oh beautiful, then you understand the opening, and finally you get to really learning that theory. That would be great. However, unfortunately, as with most things in life, it is not that simple. The real flowchart looks a bit more like this, with a million arrows going everywhere, because it isn't just some linear process you can follow, ticking boxes and just, find something, then I'm going to explore it, then understand it, then learn it. It doesn't work exactly like that because, okay, for instance, you find something, you explore it, but you don't like it, so you go back to find something else. You find something and try and explore it, but how can you really explore it without understanding and learning it at the same time? How can you really understand an opening if you don't know any of the theory? How can you explore it if you don't understand it, and understand it if you don't explore it? And how can you find anything if you don't learn anything in the first place? And how can you do any of this? The point is, it gets a little bit messy. I'd much rather model this as more of a pyramid, as you can see here. Only once we've found something, and also we've explored it, and we've understood it to a reasonable extent, should we really delve into that opening and learn it. You need all three of these kind of fundamental concepts that work very much in tandem with each other before you really get to know an opening. Now, the word learning at the top of this pyramid, I mean, obviously this whole process is kind of learning in a way. By learning, what I'm referring to is the actual memorization of different lines. There will be a segment at the end of the video where basically I talk about exactly how to do that with a very, very useful tool that may or may not be sponsoring this video, which definitely is sponsoring this video, so please stick around until the end to support the channel. Thanks very much. However, before we get to that learning segment, let's retract that beautiful green. Look at this animation, by the way, guys. Can you just subscribe, like, comment, all of that right now, just for the animation effort on Google Slides here, please. Anyway, sorry, before we get to that actual learning stage, the memorization of the lines, and you know how to do that with things like spaced repetition, etc., it's super important that we first sort of recognize these three central tenets as the groundwork for basically a good opening repertoire. Now, the rest of this video from here on out is effectively going to be me giving you a bunch of different recommendations, different tools and ideas and websites and books, and even specific grandmasters to check out the games of on specific database websites. I'm just going to be throwing you a bunch of information that I've found personally very helpful on how to first of all get the inspiration to play an opening, but then really develop a fluency and fundamental understanding of the opening that will lead you to be able to not only learn it faster, but obviously play it better. So let's get into it. Now, if you've been in this sort of chess community online for any amount of time, you will have doubtlessly heard about this difference between the positional and the tactical. And you might have heard specific masters referred to as, or even just specific players referred to as, positional players or tactical players. Undoubtedly, across history, however, we can see that there have been these grandmasters who, yes, they've got a great balance of both. Every grandmaster will be incredible at positional and tactical chess. However, there are those who definitely prefer these really outlandish sacrifices and these very flamboyant and tactical games. And there are others that prefer a sort of quieter, more positional, often more closed game where it's about, you know, slowly improving your pieces and eventually there's some crushing, normally simple tactical finish to the game. Now, I'm sure each of you watching this video kind of see yourself as either a positional or a tactical player. If you don't, that is completely okay. But consider what maybe appeals to you more. Do you want a slow, methodical, very, very precise kind of fight where there's, you know, maybe low risk in the short term, but each move might have these really, really unforeseen long-term complications where, you know, it's about putting your bishop on c2 or d3 in a little closed position, which is better, you know, the pawn structure being closed, where's the backward pawn at? Or do you want to crash everything open, have an absolute mess, and, you know, take your opponent into the forest and fight them, as Mikhail Tal said? Now, of course, you can guess where Tal is on this spectrum. I should clarify this spectrum where it says most and least. We are talking about most respect for material, basically. Most concern for, you know, having a pawn. Someone like Korchnoi, who you see here, I think he was famous for basically shouting like, no, every pawn is a potential queen when someone gambited a pawn. Very, very concerned about material and really treated his pieces with the utmost respect. And so here I've got this kind of, I've put 9 masters loosely based around a spectrum found in, I believe, Lev Albert's Chess Openings for Black Explained, if you want to check that book out. But here are 9 players ordered from most respect for material to least respect for material. We've started with Korchnoi, of course. Then we're going to go for Petrosian, who is, you know, very much still really respects the material, very positional. Karpov, absolute positional wizard. Then we get more Capablanca, more central. We get Kasparov, you know, almost, I put him like bang in the center. He just had an absolutely excellent balance of both. Again, with Fischer, these kind of goats in the middle here, you know, Kasparov, Fischer. Obviously, Magnus could be on this list as well, but I've tried to go for sort of pictures that could all be in black and white because it looks cool. And then, of course, we've got Mikhail Tal, the GOAT himself, Paul Morphy from the 1850s, a real throwback there, and then Nezhmetdinov. We have Rashid Nezhmetdinov right at the end. This man did not even slightly care about any of his pieces. It was just sacrifice everything and win every single game. So we've got this broad lineup. We've got Korchnoi, Petrosian, Karpov, Capablanca, Kasparov, Fischer, Tal, Morphy, Nezhmetdinov. That is by no means a comprehensive list. There are incredible masters like Alexei Shirov, honorable mention, would be towards the sort of Nezhmetdinov end of the list. But generally speaking, each really, really talented player will fall somewhere along the spectrum. I think these 9 are a great example to basically pick one and check them out. I would group them into 3s. So if you generally consider yourself more a positional player, then I would have a look at those first 3. If you want to be extremely aggressive and attacking, look at the last 3. And if you want a mix of both, which a lot of people do, and also just whoever you are, you will benefit from looking at any of these players' games. Again, I stress there are many, many, many other masters who should be on this list. However, this is just to give you a starting point to sort of go off and explore. And you could search, for instance, okay, players similar to Mikhail Tal. There are none. He's unrivaled. But you get my point. Now, me personally, I want to be basically as close to the sort of Tal, Morphy, Nezhmetdinov end of the spectrum as I can. It's far more exciting. I can appreciate a beautiful Karpov game, but personally, I'm going to be looking at these players and the kind of openings that they're playing to find inspiration for my own openings more towards that scale. So I'll be looking at the games of Morphy, Tal, and Nezhmetdinov just from this example. I think broadly speaking, the most important takeaway from this is not, okay, go and look at every single one of Bobby Fischer's games. I mean, you should do that, but just to establish in maybe a lot of the beginners watching this mind that there is this kind of spectrum that not all chess players are just trying to play like Stockfish. They are not just trying to play the same style of chess, and it's not like who can just do that the best. People have different playing styles. It is one of the beautiful facets of this game. Another honorable mention I've got to say, Richard Rapport. Absolute GOAT. Again, he would be towards the right. You can see where my bias lies clearly, but I thought I'd include this section of the video just in case some of you had absolutely no idea when to start and you weren't even very familiar with sort of famous chess players of the past. But okay, brilliant. We've got a grandmaster to idolize. What should we actually do about that in terms of forming an opening repertoire? Transition. Okay, so once you have a grandmaster in mind, or an international master, or even a national master, someone that just their playing style would appear to resonate with you, whether that be through videos you've watched from YouTube or through one of the recommendations I've just given you, I think it's often a really, really useful thing, especially when you have no idea what opening you want to play, to pick a master that you think you kind of want to play like them. You won't be able to, but you can at least try. My next port of call is chessgames.com. Now, they are very generous with the advertising space, but we can just scroll past that. It is not that deep. And there are many useful functions on this website. There is, for instance, the game of the day. There is the player of the day. There is the opening of the day. You can see here along at the left. But what I find most useful is, okay, let's say you want to be a super egregiously attacking player with no respect for any material whatsoever. You might want to search for the games of Nezhmetdinov. Now, I find this database really, okay, apart from all the ads here, I find this database extremely useful, especially because of this page that comes up here where you can see the opening name, the dates just because it's interesting, but the amount of moves the game ended in. And here we have like 500 pages of Nezhmetdinov games, all just at one click away. And what I do, which is not necessarily the most mature approach, but I tend to look for the games that end in the fewest moves. Let's say, for instance, this Vienna Gambit that ended in 15 moves that Nezhmetdinov won against a man by the name of Samsonov. And then here we can just tab through this game and we can see the extremely aggressive ideas that Nezhmetdinov uses in this opening. And okay, just quickly, just because I want to show you this game, he sacks a rook and then a bishop and then mates with a smothered mate in the center of the board. This is like one of the most, I might cover this in like a YouTube short or something. Anyway, the point is that we can go on here, we can go back and we can look at any of these games. Okay, this game was with White. He won in 17 moves. That kind of means it has to be an opening success because, there wasn't much of a middle game. And so we can tab through this game. We can see the approach that he had to Alekhine's defense with this chase variation. Or is it the chase variation or the Fischer variation? Not entirely sure, someone check in the comments, but the point is that we can see c5 here was his approach, then bishop c4, a very, very, very aggressive setup against Alekhine's defense, knight to h3, and you can gain inspiration from this, and he wins the bishop there, obviously. The idea, initially, all we're looking for here is that spark. We're trying to find something. Exploring it's a different matter. Like picking up on that idea that we're going to go for this knight and play that variation instead of going for d4, which I believe is more classical, or maybe knight f3 or knight c3 or something like this. going for c5 and then going for bishop c4, we can take that little nugget of inspiration, let's say, and then we can move over to something like Lichess to actually explore that with an engine and with the Masters database in Lichess to see how people mostly respond, also with the database of actual Lichess players. I find this database really easy to navigate in terms of this particular page here, and also really helpful when we go onto the player profile to actually see, for instance, like the number of games they have, the most played openings, which is a super relevant feature here, that you can actually see, okay, look, King's Indian, English, Nimzo Indian, we're looking at an English with c4, c5, like symmetrical English, and then with black pieces, the French, the Sicilian, Queen's Indian, all very standard stuff. However, you can see that these openings would probably differ slightly from the most played openings of Paul Morphy, for instance, which would just be King's Gambit, King's Gambit, King's Gambit, King's Gambit. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to this Nezhmetdinov game where I like the look of this opening idea with c5 and bishop c4. This is something I want to explore, and so I'm going to scroll down and download the PGN. You can see here PGN, we can download that, and then we can hop over to Lichess here. Now this is why I love Lichess, because we can go learn, study, create a new study. Instead of just immediately clicking create chapter, what I'm now going to do is go to my downloads and drag that PGN into the choose file option here. You can see the text all pastes, and now when we create the chapter, you can see that up here we've got Rashid Giviatovich Nezhmetdinov versus Vladas Mikhanov. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but as our chapter title, and we've got the whole game here embedded into our study immediately. Now, we're not really interested in much past the point where our opponent made a really stupid move, other than just knowing in the back of our mind how to punish it. But what we can do here, and what I love to do, is just turn on the engine and open the Masters database. Now here, the Lichess Masters database is something that I use all the time, and currently what we're doing is preparing against knight to f6, e5, knight here, and then c4. Okay, this is all very standard. d4 is the main move, however c5 is played 40% of the time at master level. Knight here, and is bishop c4 the main move, 41% of the time then. Okay, so bishop c4, this is a line, and now we can investigate this opening because I kind of like the look of it. You can see that the engine, you know, I mean, it doesn't think it's the greatest opening of all time. However, we are seeing that people will play e6 or c6. I mean, there really is no other option for this knight. There's a potential trap that we can now look into, which is that, okay, if knight to f4, then d4 is going to attack that knight, the knight's going to have to move, and we can just develop and have a completely crushing advantage. Our opponent literally has moved one piece, and it's a knight to e6. That would be kind of fun. And it's at this point actually exploring the game and also the opening that you can think, okay, well, you know, knight f4, it's probably, you know, not many good players are going to play this move. It makes no sense. d4 is obvious. However, especially if you're a low rated player, I mean, just knowing the fact that you are going to get this tempo could potentially be something that you work into your repertoire. e6 here, and then you can see that, okay, well, what happens if I take? This could be something that you initially investigate. Takes, d4. Actually, have you achieved much? Because after d6, one of these pawns is going to drop. You're going to have to take. Takes here, and then, I mean, if you take and take, you've just achieved nothing, and you've given your opponent a bishop pair. This doesn't make sense. But you see, it's this kind of reasoning that we really need to establish, in the sense that, okay, we decide that this is going to be part of our opening, but when I talk about understanding as well as exploring, they kind of go hand in hand, because as we explore, we can think, okay, well, maybe a natural move might be to try and take this and double some pawns. But the reason that it's not necessarily a great idea is because d6, we've lost our bishop pair. That understanding is going to be so fundamental. But as we get deeper and deeper into the opening, okay, e6, d4 is the main move, and then went for knight c3. This is still heavily played at master level, 44% of the time. There are 84 master games, but you know, we stray further and further away from that mainline theory. This is definitely not mainline. Mainline would not have been going for c5. Mainline probably wouldn't have been going for bishop to c4, and also knight c3. We are kind of picking the second best, or the second master move each time, the second most popular master move. And now obviously we can prepare against bishop takes, then d4. I mean, this looks really strong, this looks really interesting. But okay, takes is the most popular move. Taking with the d pawn is also most popular, and then queen h4, queen e2, and we are still in 6 master games. Bishop takes pawn, and you can see, I believe in the Lichess database, no, the Nezhmetdinov game won't come up because I think it's just happened a little bit too early. This was a 1948 game, right? And then here you can actually see that knight h3 is a move that a master has played before. Not to great effect apparently, and we can look at Nezh's move. The point is, we can delve as deep as we like in this environment of this sort of Lichess analysis board. We can make notes. If we scroll down here, we can click on this note function here. I mean, we can make whatever notes we want, but the point is that this completely random example, I didn't pre-select this game. I just genuinely, okay, obviously I defined our 9 masters to look at, picked one of them just because it's the most far right and it was the most interesting to look at, a random game from him then, and a random opening from that, and all of a sudden we've got this kind of brewing idea about maybe going for this hunt variation and going bishop c4, and this is the kind of thing where not only would you want to look at the Masters database, but especially as a lower rated player, you'd want to look at the Lichess database. Are people playing knight f4? 7% of people in the Lichess database are playing knight f4, and it's these numbers that I find super helpful for preparation. Knight f4 and knight b4 make up 10% of people responding to this. Now admittedly that will be lower rated players, however most of you watching will be relatively low rated players. If knight b4, by the way, there's the very nice queen b3, which is a mate threat and a threat on the knight, and if you try and save the knight, bang, that is checkmate. So again, a little trap just to explore, just to familiarize yourself with, and knowing that here people are going for, okay, yeah, e6, you can prep against this, but again, 10% of the time, people losing the game on move 5, this kind of starts to seem interesting. It harks back to that original thing that I said at the start of the video, talking about that forest metaphor, where basically you can walk the forest as much as you like on your own, and this is a very useful tool, I believe, the Lichess database. It's just a well-integrated tool to allow you to really explore an opening. And then once you've got the opening and you've understood some ideas and you've spent a good while looking at it, this is not the only tool, this is just the one I use and the one I think is the most useful, then it is time to learn it. Transition. Okay, so I'm recording this on Friday the 6th of October, and tomorrow is the first day of a 2-day chess congress that I'm playing in. Depending on when this video comes out, you'll either have seen the video about this or you will be going to see the video about this congress. But there are 5 rounds, all classical chess, so 75 minutes each plus a 10-second increment. It's over 2 days. I'm very excited, but I don't really feel ready. And the way I'm going to get ready is by using chessbook.com. Now, I know this is obviously a sponsored segment. However, I genuinely have been using this quite a lot. Pretty much every day I'll come on here and do my practice your repertoire feature, where they basically use spaced repetition to tell you which aspects of your repertoire you need to practice, and you can go through the moves move by move. But I'd say my favorite thing about ChessBook is almost certainly the fact that it's just such a clean way to synthesize all of the chess theory that I get from YouTube, from the Lichess database, from looking at master games, from reading books, from friends recommending it, all the things that I've talked about earlier in the video. This is a super useful place to just put that in and then learn it. And not only does it help you learn it, but it helps you understand it as well. Before we jump into this, one more thing is that you see it says cover position seen in 1 in 400 games. Now this is an option basically where you can decide your coverage goal. So 1 in 75, 100, 150, 200, 300, and 400. Obviously going from basic to bulletproof. Apparently tournament ready is only knowing the positions that occur 1 in 300 games. But you know we've got to go for bulletproof. So keeping that in mind, this 36% figure might make more sense. Basically what it's saying is what I've inputted as my white repertoire is 36% of all the positions that occur at least 1 in 400 times. If we go on keep building your repertoire here, you can either go to the biggest gap in your repertoire, i.e. maybe the Sicilian defense, for instance. However, if I choose something else to work on, you can see here that, okay, look, e4, I mean, my coverage is okay for these two, not the best. It's very good for the Caro-Kann, of course. And it's pretty decent for the French, but I haven't even touched the Scandinavian. So if I want to now input this Blackmar-Diemer line with here, let's say knight f6, f3, here, takes, queen here, bishop e3, queen here, queenside castles, and then here, I've reached the coverage goal, i.e. that if I carry on and click keep adding moves, this is now 1 in 2.3 thousand games this actually happens, but I'm just basically going to show the knight b5 here, and this would be checkmate. Very interesting trap, it's called the Halassar trap. And if I want to add this to my repertoire, all I do is click save these moves to my repertoire. But of course, the most useful feature and the feature I'm going to make the most of now is practice your repertoire. Once you've now built it, this is going to go through the 75 moves that it believes I need to practice the most based on what I've got wrong consistently in the past or what I haven't practiced as much. So I'm going to blast through all of these to feel prepared for tomorrow. Okay, so I've just gone through my practice session. I practiced 74 moves, played them right 93% of the time, which is quite helpful, and these moves will be due for review again in 1 day. So, very useful stuff. I'd really recommend checking out ChessBook. partly because this is a sponsored video, but also like 95% because I genuinely think this is a really useful tool. I believe there's a free version where you get 400 moves just for free, just by making an account. And then I think if you want unlimited moves, it is something like $4 a month. It is ridiculously cheap for such an all-encompassing and useful chess tool that can help not only build your repertoire, but of course, learn your repertoire. So click the link down in the description if you want to check it out. Okay, so thank you very, very much for watching this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that 4-minute, extremely high effort animation process at the start, and also were able to glean some wisdom, let's say, from the master's recommendation, the whole going through the chessgames.com, lead chess study, and of course CHESSBOOK. I'll leave links to all of these websites. I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys already know the links, but I'll leave the links in the description anyway. But I really hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you got the sort of overall message that I'm trying to deliver here. This is a kind of more creative video on this channel. Obviously, this is not just me playing chess. So I'd really, really appreciate any support and any love you guys could show it. If you did enjoy, liking, commenting, subscribing if you're new, would really appreciate it. And if you didn't enjoy it, comment and let me know why, and I will be extremely hurt, but I appreciate your criticism anyway. But yeah, check out those links in the description, and I hope that this video has helped some of you, most of you, all of you in fact, feel more comfortable and more understanding and more excited even, and more knowledgeable about how to craft a really personal, effective, and enjoyable to play opening repertoire. Because let's not forget, guys, chess is a game. You're supposed to be enjoying it when you're playing it. I mean, unless you're trying to make a career out of it, you're supposed to be playing fun chess. Let your opening repertoire reflect that, is kind of all I'm saying here. And, you know, create something a little bit personal using the sort of overarching conceptual idea and also the tools that hopefully you have been aptly provided today. Thanks very much for watching the video. Leave your comments. I really appreciate any feedback on this, genuinely. It would be really helpful. I've spent about 50 hours making this video. It might not look like it. Anyway, I'm waffling. Goodbye. See you in the next one. Subscribe.